We are live.
There it is. Thank you. This is the Champaign-Urbana Mass Transit District Board meeting. It is Wednesday, September 25th, 2024 at 3 p.m. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Barnes.
Here.
DeBevick. Delgado. Fasella.
Present.
Friedman.
Here.
Nudo.
Here.
Ula. Here. Quorum present.
I would entertain a motion that we approve the agenda as distributed.
So moved.
It's been moved. Second?
Second.
And seconded. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next on the agenda is audience participation. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the board on any topic? Hearing none, we'll go on to move to the next agenda item. Is there a motion to approve the Champaign-Urbana Mass Transit District Board meeting minutes from August 28th, 2024, open session?
So moved. I would first just mention to catch in the minutes or the recording that Paul is here now.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we'll move on to communications. Are there any communications from the board? Do you have anything, Carl? Next is the Managing Director's report. Carl?
All right, thank you. I guess the first thing, before I get into the report itself, I want to ask Trustee Friedman if he noted that our marketing team tried some different colors on the charts, and I wanted to see if that addressed your concern or if we need to take another stab at it. This is just a draft.
Actually, I looked to see if you had, and yeah, that's very helpful.
That helps.
Thank
okay,
you.
good. Well, we will keep it with the new scheme then. All right, moving on to the August statistics. We had 751,542 passengers in August. That is a 3.5% decrease from the previous year. However, it is noteworthy that there were 4 fewer weekdays in this August as compared to last year, and so that certainly is a part of that. So we'll continue to monitor that as we move forward. The year-to-date ridership was up 1.8% as compared to last year. And then the next chart I think that comes up is what we've been showing you a lot over the last several years, just to show you how we look as we compare to pre-pandemic. And so we actually are faring well compared to our 2019 August ridership. And so while we had a slight decrease from last year, we are looking good compared to 5 years ago. Moving on to, moving on to operating revenue. The August operating revenue was 3.6% above August of 2023, and the year-to-date operating revenue was 4.6% above fiscal year 2024. The operating expenses were 6.9% higher in August of 2024 as compared to August of 2023, and the year-to-date operating expenses were 6.1% above fiscal year 2024. The year-to-date operating revenues were $1,717 below budget, while the operating expenses were $915,000 below budget. And And with that, I am just going to ask if you have any questions through page 36 in your board packet.
The annual passes were up 12.7%. Was that a function of because ridership was down and non-revenue annual passes stayed high, or did we increase the number of annual passes?
I'm not sure I exactly followed your question. We just had an increase in the revenue, or you're talking about the ridership?
Well, it says annual passes as a fare type increased by 12.7.
What page are you on?
Page 4.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's ridership, and so that's just the rides, the users that are using those passes. There were more of them in August of 2024 than there were in August of 2023.
Or if ridership went down and the annual pass ridership stayed the same because it's a good value to them, it increased as a percentage of the total.
That percentage is not a percentage of the total. It's a percentage of change from the same month the previous year.
So passes are up?
Yes.
That was my question.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, thank you. Now we'll move on to action items. We'll be discussing the authorization for voluntary annexation communications. Is there a motion to authorize voluntary annexation discussions?
So moved.
Been moved? Seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. I would open the floor to discussion of this item.
I'm not exactly clear what just happened. I think you actually just voted on authorizing. You just jumped to the authorization.
That was a discussion here. Just discussion of the topic here.
Okay, so this is it's an agenda item, so we didn't need to take a vote to have a discussion. I think what I'll do is just throw it over to Phil so that he can kind of make his case, and then as I understand what you think your intention was, you'll then have a vote on whether or not to authorize Phil to have these conversations.
With others, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so Phil, I'll just hand it over to you. I think Tech Services will bring up a map of the area that we're talking about.
Fancy. All right.
Thank you.
So, we've had a few people come in or write letters or emails saying that they have trouble getting to Carl Clinic on Curtis. And the reason it's not in the district is we can't, through the process we most often use, annex farmland. Under the statute, there's 3 methods by which we can, have territory added or, put into a brand new mass transit district. The first one is how we're reformed. We could set boundaries and vote on a referendum, and if people vote for it, the district is formed or expanded. The second one is what we traditionally do, where we basically unilaterally annex contiguous properties that are eligible for annexation on a regular basis, which excludes farmland, unlike the other 2 methods. And the third method would be that either voters, or if there are no voters, in this case there are no voters, landowners can basically sign a petition saying, hey, we would like to join this governmental district, and if we as the board accept that petition, then it's added to the district. So the idea would be there's essentially, looking at the lines, basically 2 parcels, or you could have a combination of 2 parcels. So basically this parcel, that parcel, or a combination of a couple of others that would get from our district to Carl on Curtis and allow that to be annexed to our district, which would allow us to serve that clinic with bus service. So the idea would basically be just, I was just saying, hey, I'd write a letter to the the two families, old farm families that own those parcels and see if one of them would be up for it. The nice thing is because farmland is assessed at such a low value under the statute, you'd be talking about, I think one parcel was maybe $60 a year and the other one was $120 is all they would pay in additional taxes. So really a pretty nominal sum for a large parcel of land. I'd probably even be willing to cut a check to cover it for a few years. So just see if people are willing to do that. It's worth asking. That's kind of where I'm at.
Thank you, Phil. Comments and questions from the board? Paul?
Deputy Managing Director Snyder was kind enough to point me to the Public Act that puts together transit districts. And should any of you have a problem with insomnia, I definitely recommend it for bedtime reading. And indeed, the Act does say that agricultural land is not has a special character to annexation. And our 2000 policies and procedures of the board actually also repeat that. So this is a interesting case, and I note that we have someone who actually is a lawyer here, and I'm not now nor ever will I be a lawyer. Now, there is service already, isn't that correct, in Route 14?
No, it does not serve the clinic directly. We do offer ADA service to that clinic. That was they're within 3/4 of a mile of the district, and so we offered ADA to that ADA service. It's our paratransit service to that clinic, but they don't have any fixed route service.
Fine. Then I'm just misreading the weekday daytime service of Route 14.
Well, there is service that is that goes near there, but it doesn't go into the clinic property and deliver people to the clinic itself.
But in principle, that route could be somewhat modified.
I'm sorry, Paul, could you pull the microphone down? I'm having a difficult time hearing you.
But in principle, that route could be so modified.
Absolutely. We have several options on route modifications to deliver service to the clinic, yes.
Now, I'm trying to be careful here. I certainly don't want another Champaign County government organization to be dysfunctional. But when I saw the article in the News Gazette, some real bells rang off. So could the MTD offer to pay the tax bill of these owners? And we could ask our attorney, but my guess is certainly not. And then I asked myself, could a member of the Board of Trustees, now, recognizing Phil's enthusiasm, and it's probably in jest, I think that's really not appropriate either. So in my mind, I would be all in favor of modifying the route, but I think it's very dangerous to go this route. And that's, my conclusion after some thinking about it.
Yeah, if I could try to take a stab at addressing the first part of your concern, and then Alex be thinking about how to address the second part of the concern, because I'm going to throw it your way. Whether or not the district could reimburse the property tax owner or not, There is no mechanism in the state law that authorizes a local mass transit district. There's no mechanism in that act that would allow for that to happen. Now, the question then becomes, just because that law doesn't speak to it, does that mean it's not allowable? And we'd have to look at case law, and so our attorneys would have to do some research on that. But you didn't specifically ask for my personal opinion on it. My personal opinion is that that would set a very poor precedent for the mass transit district to reimburse property owners for property tax paid to the mass transit district. That's my personal opinion. And having said that, I will hand it over to Alex to address the other half.
Carl is correct. If that's a question the board wants me to look at, we can look at that. I would have great discomfort. I think I share Carl's discomfort with the board, the MTD reimbursing property owners. That just opens an entire Pandora's box with every other property owner in the county saying, well, why can't you reimburse me? Because I understand what the thought is with respect to accessing this parcel of land and the benefits being sought here, but again, it's always those unintended consequences that rise up down the road, and so I share that concern. As for a board member doing it, I'm almost equally uncomfortable as well. Again, I understand the motivation behind it and the interest. No doubt, not doubting that there, but that also, I think, could set a very uncomfortable precedent with respect to that. So, if the MTD wants me to look into those issues, I certainly can, if that's something that you want me to go down.
Other comments? Alan?
I wonder if Amy or Carl would refresh everybody about the negotiations you had with Carl and approximate costs that they would incur in order to have MTDs. And then I have a comment after that.
Sure. It has been a number of years, but my recollection is that it was something like 8 or 10 years ago that we had pretty serious conversations with Carl about them contracting with the district to provide service to that location outside of our boundaries. And so we worked up a number of proposals referencing my response to Paul's question about what service could be modified. We had my memory is that we had 3 different versions of service that we could provide, and then there were and then we said, here's the cost for providing each of those service types or levels. These are going to be really round numbers because it was 8 or 10 years ago, and so I don't have the exact figure in my head, but my memory is that it was the cost to provide that service for 5 days a week, roughly from 6 in the morning till about 7 at night, so that employees can, maybe it was 6 to 6 or something like that, so that employees could use the service as well. It was roughly $300,000 a year, and we were giving a 65% discount to Carl, so they would pay $100,000 a year for that $300,000 a year service. And I believe that they took those proposals seriously, and they gave them serious consideration, but at the time they decided to not contract with us to provide that service.
Thank you. So just a couple of comments. I think Phil's heart and mind are in the right place. It's a greater good situation here where we can provide a needed service to a nearby medical facility that would enhance Carl to do this. Now, they didn't think 100,000 was worth the effort that you were providing to them. But the comment that Phil made also kind of jumbled around in my mind, and why wouldn't Carl be willing to pay $120 or something else to a taxpayer in order to get that done? And that's out of our realm. I mean, they could negotiate that with the farmers in order to get that kind of greater good. It would seem to me something in their best interest to do rather than $100,000. So I don't know how you approach that, and I don't know who's the person to approach it, because I'm unclear as to what Phil is responsible to the board and to the administration here as to what he can negotiate and what he can't negotiate. I think that's important to get that out so that Phil knows he can do this and he can't do that. But again, this is a greater good thing that I really feel strongly about, that we could help the public get transportation to a nearby medical facility. And a good one. It's got a lot of services that the one that on Windsor Road that Christie has is I use it all the time. It's very close by, and there's a density around it that would make sense.
Yeah, so I just want to make the point that that's exactly what this discussion is for, you to determine what you're authorizing Phil to do and to not do. I don't, but again, my opinion would be that you're not authorizing Phil to negotiate anything on behalf of the district. You simply are authorizing Phil to speak to these property owners and ask them to petition the district to annex them. I think it's that simple, and that is the extent to what Phil is asking for, and the extent to what Phil would have authority to do if you grant him that.
Phil?
And to some extent, you could, you know, maybe it's unconventional to have a board member pick up the phone and talk to somebody, but there's no reason we couldn't direct staff to, hey, make a couple phone calls and see if these people would be interested. Would that come across as well as a private individual doing it? I don't know. But the point is, there is another avenue towards, you know, getting this facility into the district besides our traditional annexation procedure. And I think, you know, somebody needs to make these two families aware that, hey, if one of you guys does this, that would probably do a lot of good for a lot of people's lives. So, you know, yeah, I mean, somebody needs to have that conversation. I'm willing to do it. I'm not saying I'm the only person who can do it, or even that it's my place to do it, but, you know, it's definitely a glaring deficiency in our system that needs to be rectified, and somehow or another, you know me, I'm kind of a bull in a china shop. I just want to get it solved.
So am I.
Other comments?
Yes.
George?
I don't think this is something we can ask staff to get involved in. This is not staff duty, not even the managing director. I think this is something that Phil, I applaud your initiative, and if you can convince people to join in this effort, I think that's great, but I don't think we can ask staff to involve themselves in that.
Anyone else? So, Carl,
If I could make, I'm sorry, Sharif. I just want to make one clarifying point, Phil, because you mentioned this a couple of times. Hopefully you can see the map up on the big screen. You have mentioned two parcel owners, and I haven't looked to see who owns what parcels, but I do want to note that if you're talking about the two parcels, Not sure how best to identify this because I don't have a mouse that I can hover over this. Perfect. That where the mouse pointer is, if that property and the one just north of that are the two that you're talking about.
You'd probably start with the Lowe family right here, because that would get us directly there with one parcel. And there's actually, I think you could go catty corner here, I'm not sure.
You can't. That's the exact point that I wanted to make. That's called cornering, and state law, we've had, not Alex, but previous legal counsel look at that, and within the state of Illinois, annexation is not allowed with cornering, and so that's fine if you're talking about those two properties that are directly north, but I just wanted to make the point if you're talking about the ones just to the west of those, that you would actually, you could do those two, but you also would have to do the one south of Curtis also, so that you're not cornering, because you can cross streets, but you can't kitty corner across streets. So I just wanted to make that clear for you and your efforts and this conversation. Sorry, Sharif, you were going to say something.
Appreciate that. We're a rook, not a bishop, I guess.
No, that's fine. So I was thinking, as we pretty much know that this is a serious issue. Like, we are talking about patients, and many of the patients, oftentimes, they don't feel like, or they don't have the capability of driving. So if there is a transit option, that would be a win-win situation for everyone. But at the end of the day, money is the biggest issue, and also other legal matters. So I was thinking, like, okay, I totally understand that MTD cannot call anyone and ask for this. This is understandable. How about other regional entity, like people who work with transportation as a regional entity, whether they could approach? Like, personally, we are working with a couple of landowners north of Curtis and Mattis intersection, because we are helping City of Champaign for Mattis Avenue upgrade from Curtis all the way up to Windsor, like, having bike lanes and other things. So it seems like the city also knows about the bike connections, the importance of bike connections and all that. So the regional entities like the MPO, they should also understand the importance of having a transit connections. So can we discuss this in another forum, like the Court State meeting, to like, have a discussion about this, and whether the MPO can take some initiative on this?
I think the short answer is yes. We can have a conversation. This would be the City of Champaign in this case, to see if they would be willing to talk to those property owners. I don't know what their response to that would be, but we could broach the subject with them.
I was thinking
also health consumers organization that might have interest to comment. Healthcare consumers. I'm not sure the exact title of the organization.
I'm sorry. Was that a question for me?
That was just a comment that there may be others besides the City of Champaign, or in addition to the City of Champaign, that might have comments or be able or willing to have discussions.
I think public health district could be a good option to consider, because it's a public health issue at the same time. And I was actually thinking, instead of City of Champaign, whether I was thinking about, like, whether courts can have a discussion, or like, trying to look for some options. Like, it seems like it's a no-brainer to have a transit connection there, but I totally understand all the limitations the transit agency has. But if we can take some initiative, either here or through another entity, it should be a good effort.
Any other comments?
So
Paul?
this number of $300,000 that you admitted was maybe 10 years old and subject to your memory, should this area be annexed and taxable, the burden on Carl would be zero.
Well, they do own the pharmacy, but.
They do own the pharmacy, fine. So, I don't think at this moment we have a good understanding of what would be possibly voluntarily annexed and what would then be possibly a part of our district. I mean, there's all these parcels up there, and this issue that you just raised about cornering, that's new to me. That's where I stand on this.
Yeah, so that's probably a future discussion pending whether or not there are enough of these farm parcel owners who would agree to petition for annexation. But just hypothetically, presuming that Phil is successful in that effort or QOTS is successful in an effort or something, then that what you see in the pink area is what staff would recommend. If we get to that point, staff would recommend that we annex the entirety of what's eligible south of Curtis for annexation. So that would include the Carl property, but it would also include the Liberty at, I think it's Liberty at the Lake subdivision. But that would be a future discussion for you to have, whether or not you wanted to pursue that. But that would be the staff recommendation.
I don't see what we're arguing about. We're asked to authorize Phil to approach these people to talk to them. Period. He's not authorized to make any deals. There aren't any deals he could make. What's wrong with having him approach the appropriate property owners and see if he can get the cooperation necessary? If they have conditions, he could bring this back, but I don't see how we can lose out by having Phil talk to them.
Other comments?
Well, at the risk of repeating myself, I think the problem is the quid pro quo.
How about I just don't bring that up then, Paul? How about I just don't bring that up?
Bring which part up?
I guess sometimes if you say to somebody who's, only objection is that it's going to cost him $40 a year, say, you know what, it's $40 a year. I'll write you a check for 5 years worth of it if you're going to work with this. I can leave that alone. I don't think these people are going to be like that. That's just, I guess as a real estate broker in the past, you have somebody who says, well, it's not a bad deal, but I don't want to pay the survey. And I'm thinking, well, I'm making $20,000 commission. Don't worry about it. I'll cover the survey. Just sign the darn thing. You get people past the objection. That's salesmanship. But I don't think we're going to have that objection. I personally know a number of these landowners. If they've got a reason for objecting to it, I don't think it's going to be because they have a problem with paying $40 so that sick people can get to see their doctors. So I shouldn't even mention that, and I think we can just leave that alone.
Do we have a consensus or possible motion?
I will offer a motion that the board authorizes Phil to approach the landowners in the area that needs to be looked at and initiate a discussion with them.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, our next action item, appointment of a new district secretary. And that's Katie Good. Do we have any discussion? Do we have a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved
Second.
and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, our final action item is to consider the approval of a contract for demolition and grading at Chester and Water. That's right across the tracks over there.
Yeah, so Ashley and Josh are coming up here to join me, and as Dick just mentioned, this is for the properties that the district owns just on the other side of the railroad tracks here, and so it is when we bought the properties, the idea was that at some point we would expand the parking lot that the district owns on the east side of the tracks. These buildings have sat vacant since then, and they are not in very good shape. They weren't in very good shape when we got them, and one of the buildings we've looked at as a potential development site, and when we looked at we got an engineering estimate on bringing that building up to current codes. It was multi-millions of dollars just to bring it up to code, never mind actually develop it into anything. And so the board at the time said, no, thank you. It's not worth it to do that. So here we are. We're still talking about the Illinois Terminal Expansion Project, and I guess you could look at this as, phase point one of the Illinois Terminal Expansion Project, because demolishing these buildings and grading that area will allow us to use that space on Chester and Water Street as our transfer area during the time that the Illinois Terminal is under construction. And so we will need an alternative location to operate from, and that is the best location to do that. And so this is a baby step in getting ready for that project. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ashley to talk about the process of bidding for the contractor, and then Josh is here to answer any kind of facility questions that you might have. And George, you already have a question.
Just one, and I think I know the answer, but I want to verify it. Is there any historical significance to these buildings?
I don't believe so. There's no designation of historical significance. I have had conversations with TJ Blakeman with the city of Champaign, who is probably our local premier expert on historical archives in Champaign, and he has never indicated that there's any historical significance to them.
Okay, with that, I will just say that this IFB was released on August 1st. We got 4 bids that were open September 5. Mid-Illinois was determined to be the lowest cost and the most responsible and responsive bidder, so that's the contract that we're recommending for $529,200. And Carl basically gave you all of the other details. There is a map at the end of your memo. If you want to see where the buildings are located, we could see them out these windows, I suppose, as well. This project is already in the FY25 budget as part of the Illinois Terminal Expansion Project, and so the district will utilize 80% federal 5307 funding with a 20% local match for the work. Are there any additional questions? The scope is included in D, the summary of the activities that will be included in the contract. but I believe Carl covered pretty much everything else about how we intend to use it and why we're doing demo at this time.
So just one question. The contractor which was selected, I believe they have satisfactory status with MTD?
Yeah?
Great.
Ashley?
Yes.
So two questions. One is, you said there's a federal match, and Carl said this is a Phase 1A of the terminal expansion. None of the money that we've had allocated from the feds is being used for this. This is a separate grant we're asking for, or how is this working?
That's a good question. Technically, it's part of the same grant as the entire Illinois Terminal Expansion project, but it's not being pulled from the competitive grant that is specifically allocated to the construction of the expansion.
So it doesn't touch it?
Correct.
Okay.
We added some of our own kind of saved up federal money to bolster that grant for
That's good.
additional activities like these.
That's good. Secondly, Phase 1A of, as I've asked several times, I really would like to see, have a special session to see the plan. I mean, the actual plan of 1A and everything else that I think the board needs to look at ongoing. Again, I'll raise that.
We will be so thrilled to bring that to you when it exists. It does not exist quite yet. This is a very preliminary activity, but we haven't formally engaged an architect yet. And so until we do that, I don't think we'll be able to bring you even a general schedule. But we have a meeting actually scheduled with our developers tomorrow to keep these conversations moving forward. So hopefully we'll have more tangible information to bring to you.
I was under the impression that there are several architects involved in the discussions right now.
We went out to bid for an architect actually several years ago when we were working with a different development group.
Right.
But it was right as things were going sideways because of the pandemic and the hyperinflation, and those developers ended up stepping aside. And so we have done some continued work with that architect, but we don't have a contract. We've never brought to the board a contract for the work, for the design work of the entire project. We did a little agreement with them to do some planning charrettes, and they did some really preliminary massing diagrams to kind of help us conceptualize as a development team, MTD staff and the private developers working together. And actually, we had City of Champaign Planning, TJ Blakeman, who I mentioned earlier, and Bruce Knight participated in that. So we used the architect for that, but they're not an architect of record yet for the project. The reason that we haven't been able to bring that contract to you is because we're still, as Ashley just noted, we're still trying to work through a development agreement with the developer, and part of the development agreement is a cost share structure. So when we have a contract with the architect, who pays for what and at what percentage and that kind of thing. And so we're still working through those steps which is why Ashley said we just don't have anything to show you yet, because we haven't gotten to that point because we're still negotiating this development agreement.
Okay, the second part to actual plans would be the negotiations, and again, we just hired a firm that is an expert in real estate, and I'm hoping that you agree that we are going to have them jump into the negotiations and look over your shoulder to assist, and we as a board get an ongoing update in closed session so that we're private, and I think that's appropriate to have a closed session, that we're made aware of it.
Two things. One, we are reaching out to Volkert, and they will be plugged into the process. The second part about closed sessions, we have to be careful about that because there are very specific exceptions that you can use closed sessions for. And so just giving you a project update is not, that would not be an eligible exception of the Open Meetings Act for a closed session.
Negotiations?
Negotiations would be, but just
Well,
giving,
that's
just
what I
giving you.
asked. Negotiations, that's what we're asking about. That's what I'm asking about. I can't speak for the rest of the board, but, you know, ongoing negotiations are subject to the board's awareness. We're not talking about anything else but an update on that.
And negotiations would be an eligible exception to the Open Meetings Act, so we could do that in a closed session.
Phil?
I guess since we're on a tangent, there had been some discussion about bringing a consultant on board to help with some possible loans or grants we were going to apply for, and maybe something relating to transit-oriented development. Are we going to see something the next few months pop up on our agendas for bringing in a consultant to help with that, or is that not very likely to happen?
We do have a draft of an RFP to get a consultant to help with that loan application process. It's not at the point of review for the board just yet. We just released it internally this week, and we plan to share it with our developers soon. Yep.
Other questions for Ashley? Okay. Oh, Phil.
I guess back to the topic at hand. I need to abstain on this one because I know several of the bidders personally, and one of them was a good friend of mine I know from the fire service. So I called him up and I said, hey, you know, I feel like for tearing down 2 buildings, $500,000 seems a little steep. And he pointed out not only is it prevailing wage, but the Twin City Equipment Building is massive structure with huge amounts of monolithic concrete. There's, I guess from what he said, the way this was written, which probably pretty smartly on our part, most contingencies that could pop up are pretty much the contractor's responsibility. So, you know, they're responsible for bringing in a substantial amount of fill to get rid of, you know, both issues with the grade and any buried debris. You know, we aren't just tearing these down because we're sick of looking at them or they're a hazard. The plan is to do something, and, you know, probably given that it's adjacent to the terminal and we're downtown, it's going to be something big. So we don't want, you know, buried bricks from 100 years ago or voids underground or anything that's going to be a big surprise when we go to break ground on the next thing. The site needs to be clean, ready to go. You know, there's stormwater improvements. This is a, you know, fairly complicated deal with multiple subcontractors. So I feel very comfortable voting for it, even though I can't really ethically. But I'm excited to see this move forward. So that's my comment.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you. Anything more from Ashley, from you, Ashley?
No?
Okay. All right.
Call for the vote.
Is there a motion to move forward?
Moved.
It's been moved. Is there a second? Second. Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Good.
George has asked for a moment, and this is not an agenda item. It's just a request for future discussion, possibly an agenda item at a future meeting. But George, just real quickly, please.
I've been reading the bylaws of the board, and one of the things I think is missing is a provision to take advantage of the Open Meetings Act provision that under certain very limited circumstances, a member of the board who is required to be absent for example, for illness or travel on the business of the district, a couple of other things, might be allowed to participate remotely by Zoom or phone or both. I've drafted a possible bylaw, but I'm not offering it today. I just want to plant the thought in your minds to think about it and know that I will be following it up eventually. I have provided copies to the administration, and Amy told me she has put it in the file, and I want to see it brought out of the file and brought to the board. But I think you need to think about the possibilities, and eventually we would have a text to vote on.
Okay, thank you, George. The next regular Board of Trustees meeting will be on Wednesday, October 30th, 2024 at 3 p.m. here at Illinois Terminal 45 East University in Champaign. Do I hear a motion to adjourn today's meeting?
So moved.
It's been moved. Second?
Second.
And seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you for your attendance.